piece for you. Of course I cook because we want to live, but you're somebody's mum, you're somebody's carer, you're somebody's wife, you're somebody's, everything.
But you're not Michelle.
Yeah.
It's called social security.
Yes,
like
I
it used
hate
to be.
the word benefits.
Yeah.
It's not a benefit, is
No.
it? No. It's a
No.
necessity to live.
Yeah.
I had that. It's not...
They've probably seen you, Michelle, thought, I'm not going to dare do
don't
that.
mess with her.
Well, hello everybody. It's Carers' Rights Day today, hopefully, as you're watching this or watching it afterwards, which is the 21st of November. My guest today is Michelle Benny, who is a double carer, actually. So we're going to talk to Michelle a little bit and explore some of the themes around carers' rights as we go through the interview. So Michelle, welcome.
Thank you.
You were telling me a little bit at the beginning, before we sort of went on air, so to speak, about your caring responsibilities. Do you want to share those with people?
Yeah, so I'm carer for my husband. His name's Paul. He's very lovely. He's got several health conditions. We've been married for 26 years. So he's pretty good, really.
He must be for 26 years.
I'm not going to trade him in. And also we have a son. We have two sons, but our eldest son, Lewis, has cerebral palsy. He's 24 now. He's a full-time wheelchair user. Also has a complex speech and language difficulty and autism.
Okay. Does your other son live with you as well?
He does. Yes, he's 20.
Okay.
He's Ashley, and he's my little rock, really, because he just always fits in with everything that's going on and never complains, and he's a good egg.
So has Ashley kind of grown up being a carer? Was he a young carer
Yes,
as well?
yeah, very much so. And I think the boys tolerate each other, but they just sort of rub along and just do their own things, really. Yeah.
How's it been? I want to focus on Ashley a little bit. How's it been for him kind of growing up as a young carer in terms of education, social life, all those kind of things?
I think it's been really difficult for him at times because Lewis has had to have so much attention. There's been appointments, there's been all sorts of difficulties that he's had, and he monopolises our time. He's quite a demanding young man, and Ashley's not. So he's very forgiving, because if Lewis is going to kick off big time, it's usually myself or Ashley, because he just loves his dad. And I've often felt quite guilty about Ashley being left out of things, although he's always with us. It's just, it's been really hard for him. And he also, he was one of the young people who, through COVID, didn't leave school properly, really. So the end of his school was just ended with masks on. So there was no prom, there was no sort of, at 16, all those things that you're supposed to do.
We didn't have a prom back in our day.
No, we didn't, no. But, they expect it now, don't they? And I think that's quite a loss for young people that, they didn't get to do their exams. He went straight to college. The first year of that was mostly online. It's quite difficult times, but he works now. He's a cook, and
fantastic.
He's just a joy to be around.
He sounds like a strong, successful young man.
He is. He's quite quiet,
Yeah.
But he's very funny. He's got a really good sense of humour, and I think that's what's got us through as a family, really.
And for people who don't know, can you just tell us a little bit about cerebral palsy?
So Lewis was born particularly early. He was 9 weeks early when he was born, and cerebral palsy for him is some damage to the bits that control your movements. So his legs and one of his arms are particularly tight, and he can't use them like we can, so he can't relax them. The bit that sort of controls that isn't quite working properly for him. It's also given him a bit of a learning disability. Having said that, he's very, very funny, very dry, very a houseful, very noisy. He's got good speech, but he really struggles at times. He's a full-time wheelchair user. He needs hoisting.
Right.
He needs support for lots of aspects of his life. A lot of frustration because he can't always do what he wants to do when he wants to do it. And then with autism coming in as well, he likes a routine, and when things change, that creates difficulties. So, yeah,
gosh, there's so much to explore there. So how old is he, first of all?
He's 24.
He's 24?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So these have been issues that you've been, as a carer, been dealing with since he was born?
Yes,
really?
yeah. So, as I say, Paul and I have been married for 26 years, and 24 of those years have been quite tricky, really.
Yeah.
For one reason or another. So, it's... but you've got to keep smiling, haven't you?
Absolutely. was Paul facing challenges back then as well?
Yes. So the day before we got Lewis's diagnosis, Paul had a hernia operation, and that affected his. He was fine. After the operation, I picked him up, went to hospital, got the diagnosis for Lewis. Came home, had to tell him, even though he'd only just come home from hospital that day. And we were in the process of buying a house, and his immunity was quite low at that point. And 2 weeks later, I was due to go out on a night out, and I thought he was messing about because he had to look after Lewis for the evening. And he said, I feel really poorly. And all of a sudden he couldn't stand, he couldn't do anything. He had to just lie in a dark room. We had to have the doctor out for anti-sickness injections.
Wow.
And it was like this...
That's scary, actually.
Very scary, yes,
yeah.
So he... the doctor said, it's probably something like labyrinthitis, you probably got a bug and what have you. They suspect it was a viral infection that attacked his balance organs. So he doesn't have balance organs, or he's slightly in one ear, but not the other. So he had to sort of learn to do everything again, walking around, getting up off a seat. So quite tricky times.
It's kind of a weird challenge for Paul then, because he needs care and support, but he's also a carer himself.
Mm-hmm.
So it's interesting, because many people don't even realise they're carers.
No.
So it's kind of how's that for him? Sort of being cared for and being a carer, or is it something as a tight family, which I can see you are? Is it something that you don't really think about it in those senses?
I think for Paul it's been quite hard. Nobody expects at 35 to not be able to work anymore. At that point he couldn't do hardly anything. He relied on me for...
What did he used to do?
He was a lorry driver and a machine operator.
Okay.
So he used to work 60 hours a week. He was
Yeah.
really busy. So all of a sudden you had that huge drop in income. I had a fairly new, 15-month-old baby. It was just chaos. And I can still see the day that they said, this is what's happened to him. This is what we think's happened. And I just burst into tears. And he said, why are you crying? And I think at that point it was just so difficult to comprehend how this was going to affect everything, really. He was told a lot of things, that he wouldn't be able to ride a bike anymore, he wouldn't be able to walk on sand, he wouldn't...
Right.
All those things.
Yeah.
And he's really determined, so he did.
He
did all those things.
Yeah.
But it wasn't for a few years that we realised how much that affected him, and that he also had chronic fatigue. So that came as another blow, but a few years later on. So he did do a little bit of work for a while, but it was just exhausting. So every day he would come home and he couldn't do anything else. And as you said, our family is really important, so you need to,
Yeah, and that's kind of quite an important point, because at the moment we're in an environment where and it doesn't matter who's in government, they're very keen to get people back to work.
Yeah.
And there's clearly,
Yeah.
a shortage of skills, and that's a complex thing, and that's a whole other different podcast and different discussion.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the things that employers need to realise is that actually people with chronic fatigue or ME, or even early stages of neurological conditions like MS, they're capable of doing some work perhaps, but not on their terms necessarily. So you can't sit there at your desk from 9 to 5.
No.
And that's a really difficult thing. Did Paul have any issues with the DWP or any of those kind of...
We've had huge
malarkeys,
issues
right.
over the years.
Yeah.
Until the next diagnosis came along of severe psoriasis, nobody could really see what was wrong, because when you're tired, you don't look any different. When you're dizzy, you might look a bit like you've had a few too many wines, but it's not really a physical thing. And when he received his diagnosis, the people from ENT, and there was a particularly good consultant at that time, he said, Paul asked him, how does this compare to like losing a leg? And he said, well, it's far worse. You can put on a different leg. I can't give you your balance organs back. So a lot of people didn't really believe how poorly he was.
What sort of, when you say people, do you mean things like, I don't know, you park in a disabled space and people kind of...
I've always wanted that, but I've never had it because I've always wanted it for somebody to complain. But no, I've not had that. It's not...
They probably see you, Michelle, thought, I'm not going to dare
don't
that.
mess with her. No, it was more friends, family, groups that he was in, wondering why he couldn't keep up on the bike, wondering why he was fussing over things. And that sort of brought on, that sort of stress then brought on psoriasis, which all of a sudden people could see because it was on your skin, and he had it really bad. And again, it's one of those conditions that's brought on by stress, and it's just...
And then that impacts perhaps on your own self-esteem, doesn't it?
It does, yeah. And he's been through a lot, really. Yeah. It was only then that people started saying, oh, perhaps he is poorly. And people sometimes will say the oddest of things, and I'm probably a bit sensitive because I'm quite protective of my family, but it's really hard when people do that.
Well, it is, especially if you know people, if they're friends or extended family, or even somebody perhaps in an like any organisation where somebody is a professional, you expect all of those people to know better. And I think when it comes to, because there's so many conditions whereby you can end up being a carer for somebody, that unless you can actually see somebody in a wheelchair, because thankfully these things don't happen to most people.
No.
They have got, it's beyond their understanding, so they're likely to say something stupid. I mean, one stat for the camera is that I read this as every day, so I need to check this out, but every day 12,000 people in the UK become carers in one shape or form. I found that kind of a staggering statistic, actually. Yeah. I'm sure that's every week. But either way, what the definite figure is 5.7 million carers in the UK. So that's, sort of getting on for 10% of the population at some level.
Yes.
And it may be that some of those people are carers themselves, but they don't realise it.
No. And when it came to making claims for... PIP or DLA as it was back then, that was always interesting. So I don't think, apart from, every claim that Paul has made has been, we don't think so. And then we had to go back to the point where when DLA became PIP, it was taken away altogether, and we had to go to a tribunal, which I would say is probably one of the worst couple of hours I've spent. And we've had some tough times, but that was unbelievable, how we were treated, how you were talked down to, how you were asked the questions about, oh, why is it that you can drive but you can't cook a meal? It's like, well, what's the relevance of that?
Well, that's just a stupid question, isn't it? Because there's plenty of people who can drive, but their cooking would...
And they also said, they thought that he hadn't got over the fact that his son had cerebral palsy, and he was probably, still struggling with that. Again, even if he was, and he's not, what relevance was that? Because if he was struggling with that, that's still an illness. That's still a difficulty.
Who was talking down to you in the tribunal?
There were 3 members of a panel who it was in the court. It was in Truro Magistrates Court.
So it's kind of an intimidating situation.
Hugely.
Yeah.
Hugely. You have to go in. You have to go through the metal detector. You have to sit beyond 2 desks away from this panel of professionals.
So you're physically a long way away from them.
Mm-hmm.
It's reminiscent. It makes you think about the poor laws, or when the peasants were cast before the Lord, and they're down one end of the wooden barn, and the Lord is up the other end, and you do wonder in 500 or 1,000 years whether we haven't come full circle in some respect.
In some respects, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, yes, that's been tricky.
And how were the DWP specifically in dealing with?
Not particularly helpful. Actually, last time Paul had to go for an assessment, and that lady was pretty good. But I think it's luck of the draw. And she could see how he struggled with things, but it's...
And is that settled now, or do you
think it's settled, but it's...
You're not going to have to go back through it again in a few years' time?
Every 5 years.
Yeah.
Yeah. Whereas for somebody like Lewis, like our son, he's that's a sort of claim now for however long they think, I suppose. It's I can't remember what they call it, but it's... So we don't have to keep going for an assessment.
What's your theory then? Is it because you think Paul is less visible than Lewis?
Yeah, probably.
You think that's what it is?
Probably.
Yeah.
But they make you feel like you're claiming something you shouldn't.
Yeah. Even though you've paid in your national insurance all these years.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there's not much we can do about Paul's health. I'd love to be able to fix him. I'd love to be able to fix everybody, but, there's not much you can do about it. Mm. Once something is damaged, that's how it is, isn't it, really? So, yeah, it's been tricky.
And what about other agencies? I mean, the other big agency that you must have had a lot of contact with has been the National Health Service.
Yes.
So how are they doing? And bearing in mind, that's a big organisation, so there's different bits of it we can talk about.
Yeah, variable. So we were never sure, as far as Lewis's birth, whether that was correct or not. There's lots of my notes that are missing, so that couldn't be proven.
Could you ask them?
Yes.
You've asked them what's happened to these notes?
Yes,
and what
it's
have
been
they said?
searched, they can't find them. There's, when Lewis was small, he had lots of input from physiotherapy, occupational therapy, and that was really good back in the early 2000s. It was, excellent service. Now, due to funding restrictions, that's more difficult, I feel, for people with young children.
Did you notice a change around about the time of austerity?
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That was a leading question, wasn't
it? Yeah. So it's difficult. We used to be able to get whatever equipment Lewis needed. It wasn't really a problem. Most recently, we've had wheelchair assessments which have been pretty dire.
In what way?
In the fact that what was supplied wasn't suitable, it wasn't measured properly, it wasn't set up properly.
That's very interesting.
It's to the point that Lewis was hurting, and we couldn't make out, because Lewis can't communicate exactly what's wrong, we couldn't make out what that was. And eventually we did some adjustments ourselves at home that you're not supposed to do, because you're not, it's NHS equipment and what have you, and we're not qualified to do that. And he's been a lot better since.
Our experience in the wheelchair service is that they don't tell you what they've done. So they, in the case of my wife, they fitted sides to her wheelchair which weren't requested, and they didn't tell her. So then that she couldn't get out of the chair. So I need to review all of her notes on that. But I thought that the approach, the lack of communication, the lack of checking, the lack of asking was appalling. Mm-hmm. And of course, if you complain, the whole complaints process, I think, is a charade. I don't know what you think. Definitely.
I did complain, and I insisted that we had another assessment, which happened last week actually. And I stood in the room until I was listened to. I wouldn't sit down. The upshot of it is, the wheelchair has to have lots of new parts, because it's not suitable for him. The backrest is too high, the cushion was no good. We're on the third cushion since March. His legs don't sit properly in it, so that they slope to one side, which is twisting his back. I mean, when you're a full-time wheelchair user and you're hoisted into that chair at 7 o'clock in the morning and you're hoisted out of that chair again at 10 o'clock at night, it needs to fit. And there's so much emphasis on how much things cost that it seems to be overlooked what actually people need.
Is that from the point of view of the wheelchair service? Are they focusing on?
Yeah.
Right, that's interesting. I've never come across that before.
Have you not?
No.
Because he had a different chair before, and that was quite a lot more money, so they don't use that company anymore.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of the company's name. There was a company they used. It's a national company, and I can't think of them. And it's replaced another one. It was taken over.
Right.
But as I'm
saying,
Sunrise
Medical?
No. It might come to me after the podcast. We'll have to add that little bit on. So what about Motability? Do you use a Motability car?
Yeah.
Oh, no. I mean,
yeah. How much do you want here?
Well, I mean, my experience of Motability is that they've been great.
Okay.
But
I'm very pleased for you. So Lewis has an accessible vehicle, so WAV, wheelchair accessible vehicles.
With a ramp at the back.
Yeah. So we had one, the first one we had was 2011, when I couldn't carry him out to the car anymore. So right, we need something that we can put him in his wheelchair.
So how old was he then? He would have been 11?
11, yeah. He was quite tiny then. I wouldn't pick him up now. He's yeah, my gosh. My back's bad enough now. But,
my son, when he was about 3 or 4, he was to get to the bottom of the hill in Turbo, and he'd go caroo like that, and he was at a point where I just could. On a summer's day, I'd be sweating by the time I got to the top, and it was a case of how quickly you could walk up the road to stop him from doing that. Anyway, that's an aside.
But so we got our first WAV. Didn't really have a lot of problems with it really. So when it came time to hand it back to get another one, because you have them for 5 years, not 3, if they're adapted vehicles.
I think you can choose, can't you? You can extend it to 5.
And with all the wheelchair accessible vehicles are 5, and you can extend them to 7.
Oh right, okay.
So so it came to time to change it, and we decided to buy it from Motability, which was great because it gave us a couple of years where it was quite cheap motoring really, which is good because I think people think that having a Motability vehicle is a cheap thing, but it is quite a lot of a chunk of money that goes every month.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, there's almost like a big down payment for it, isn't there? Which has to be, if you can't spend it then, you've got to spread it out.
Yeah. So we had, then that vehicle started to get a bit tired. So we had another grant to get Lewis, because Lewis qualified for a grant in his own right then, being 18. So we ordered another vehicle, which we've had now for 5.5 years. And yeah, that's been fascinating, that one. Partly because of government regulations with vehicles and AdBlue and different things.
Oh yeah.
So it broke down quite a lot for the first year. Then it was COVID, so we didn't use it very much at all because we were all out walking in the sunshine. And then the next sort of 3 years, it had several things wrong, but where we get it serviced is particularly bad.
Right.
The dealer is particularly bad. And
can we say what town that's in?
Truro.
Okay. Okay. I think a lot of people might be able to ascertain that.
And to the point that it was having its brakes done and they were not connected back up properly.
Really?
Yeah, which I drove for a couple of weeks, and Lewis's carer drove with Lewis in the vehicle. And when I put in a complaint, well, the RAC found out because it was making this hell of a racket. And the RAC said, what's wrong? And they took it back up to the dealer, and it was looked at and repaired. But I basically got, well, sorry about that. And it's like, we could have died. You could have sent me some flowers.
Do you think that's because I don't, as far as I'm aware, Motability, it doesn't make any difference that you're a Motability customer, that you're not paying yourself because they get paid. So do you think potentially that's something you think, oh, it's because I'm a Motability customer, so they're not as bothered because they get the money anyway? Or were you thinking, I wonder if lots of customers, regardless, have to face this?
So, 2 answers to that. In that scenario, no. I think it was 2 people that were on the job. One was doing the front brakes, one was doing the back brakes, and the one doing the front forgot. Got pulled onto a different job because it was investigated. Yeah. I don't think that was anything to do with Motability. But the problem with the dealer in question is you can never get to speak to the right person. You call, they put you through to the wrong department or wrong depot, and it's just, you feel like a nuisance being a Motability customer, and that's not pleasant. Because when you're in the showroom waiting for your vehicle and other people are spoken to in a very nice manner because they're going to buy a new car or they're going to... And I get it, they're making lots of money.
I'm surprised because if it's the dealer I'm thinking of, I'm not surprised, but other dealers are a lot better.
We didn't have that problem before.
Yeah.
But the actual vehicle, the other side of it, because there's adaptations to the vehicle, so there's reels on the inside to hold the wheelchair in and hooks and that sort of thing. And that's to be serviced every year. So that is from another company who actually did the adaptations. And we've had several problems with that as well. So
there's more that can go wrong with them because there's a big tank. Where it slopes like that, there's a big tank underneath. Mm-hmm. And if stuff goes wrong down there, then the car's jiggered for several weeks.
And
that's a technical term, folks.
The problem is when your vehicle's jiggered for several weeks and you need a wheelchair accessible vehicle, it takes a good week to get one if you can. They come from Essex generally. And
Eurocar?
No. Can't think what they're called. It'll come to me in a minute. Some begin with P. We've had several vehicles, 2 of which have broken down themselves while we've had them. We've had Lewis stuck at college because we couldn't get to him. All sorts. It's not just something that he needs and it's a nice thing. It's essential.
Right. So I'm getting the feeling here when I think about the NHS, Motability and DWP, you've not had a lot of luck at all. I mean, it sounds awful.
It's my middle name, actually,
Yeah,
Lucky. No,
Lucky.
it's not.
Yeah.
Well, I suppose it depends how you look at it, doesn't it? Because I'm lucky to have Lewis, who's born 9 weeks early.
Absolutely.
B, I'm lucky to have Paul because we get on really well after 26 years. I think that's pretty good.
Yeah.
For, the NHS is a really good service for lots of people.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'm talking about the stuff that's gone wrong, but there's lots of stuff that's gone well as well for us. It is difficult. Anything that comes down to money, it's really tricky, isn't it, now? And there'll always be times where it's trickier than others. So I'm quite forgiving, I think, really.
What additional support, or what support do you think is missing for carers?
Sometimes it feels very lonely. And by lonely, I'm always surrounded by people. I work here, it's amazing. But there's a lot of rights for people that are disabled, poorly, not so much in the caring role. So I think of, like, for instances where when Lewis turns 16, he's allowed to make his own decisions, good or bad, about things. And we're quite good with that as a family. We quite, he's just had 3 tattoos done. He drinks beer on a Saturday morning. That's
man.
Great. He's his own person, and that's what we want.
On a Saturday morning?
Yeah, it's the first thing he does before his breakfast, because he can.
Good lad.
Yeah. Why not? And I think we're good at that. I always question myself because there's things that I think, gosh, am I giving him that choice? But nobody asked me that. So when he's kicking off and I've got to help him, I've got no choice really. I mean, the only choice I would have would be to just leave him to it. But that's not always possible.
Well, because you're worried about him injuring himself, for example.
Yeah. So you end up, you're somebody's mum, you're somebody's carer, you're somebody's wife, you're somebody's, everything.
But you're not Michelle.
Yeah, and that's really hard sometimes, but not often. But there are times where I really struggle with that. And
so, in an ideal world, to not struggle, what would you like to see to mitigate that?
I think being listened to helps. So it's good to have somebody to talk to. Recently I've not been quite myself and I've struggled with some mental health problems. I've really, been quite down. And I was put on a course which was supposed to be for stress busting. And I've never been so stressed in all my life. I wasn't allowed to talk, and as you can see, I can talk for England.
I've not noticed.
But and I really, really struggled with it. And they said, well, that's okay, you can have, and it's called talking therapies, which, but anyway, so I've now got to wait for some talking therapy, some counselling to help. And I find that I've had some counselling before. I think it's really good. I think it's a really good thing to go and talk to somebody who doesn't know you, doesn't know Lewis, doesn't know Paul, doesn't know your work, doesn't know your friends. They're just somebody you can go blah, 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 to and feel quite a lot lighter about things. And the waiting list for that is like 6 months. And that's a long time for somebody who's struggling. So that would be good, to have more support in that sort of way, somebody you can just talk to. I'm lucky here. I work with such amazing people.
You work with some brilliant people, and Rory.
And Rory. And you know, there's a huge understanding here of being a carer. So, you know, we benefit from
A
that
lot of the
greatly.
staff are, aren't they?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's not, and you don't always know until we do something like Carers Day, and it's like, oh, I didn't know you were a carer as well. Because
but you don't, because some people don't like talking about it, because it's a label, but it's no more of a label than you know, people driving a car or eating a roast dinner or whatever, in that sense, because there's many things that unite us as a society,
definitely, yeah.
which we don't necessarily realise about one another.
No. Well, you and I were talking about having dogs with the same breed. It's no different, is it, really?
Absolutely.
You know, so it's... Yeah, so it's great to be in a place like this where people aren't... What's wrong with her?
So you're basically, are you saying that the one thing that carers probably need is more, or you, well, speaking on behalf of carers, you can't obviously...
No,
but
it's different, aren't they?
yeah, absolutely, is perhaps more mental health support.
More mental health support, and if we ask for help, like, don't just sort of brush it off. We need some help sometimes. I mean, I know you were saying about some stats earlier, but I was reading somewhere this week that what carers save the whole economy really is enormous.
It's in the billions, isn't it?
And it's like almost the same as what we pay for our NHS, and that is just, it's like astounding, isn't it? Because like, I don't, you know, carers can have carers allowance, can't they? But it's like a very small amount.
It's it's about £83 a week, I think.
Yeah, but if you work, you don't get it, you know?
Yeah, and I think you can earn about £530 a week. That's the maximum.
A month.
Is it a month?
Yeah.
It's a month, yeah.
Yeah. So, you know, that's really quite tough, and a lot of people only work a certain amount of hours so they can still get that carer's allowance.
Yeah.
And because, you know, once you've gone over that amount, you've lost that money. And
of course then that puts you as a carer at a detriment in terms of building your career, your experience, doing any training, actually being a more productive member of that company and society.
But there's also a fear, if you don't have that little backup of having the carer's allowance, what if something goes wrong? You know, when Paul and Lewis have been poorly at different times, you're not able to work. And it's so good to have an understanding workplace for that, but they're few and far between. You know, lots of people that I've met along our sort of carers journey have lost jobs, and, you know, it's not legal, but what do you do about it?
This actually comes on nicely to about Carers Rights Day, because there are some things which carers' rights which are being asked for, particularly being almost the 10th equality aspect of the Equality Act to think about. So, you know, the right to unpaid carers leave, which some employers are better than others on.
Yeah, we're very fortunate here.
Requesting flexible working, again, which that can support productivity very strongly, because if you work when you feel like it or you're able to, you're more likely to produce quality than being stressed and forced to do something when your personal circumstances are stopping it. The GP practice identifying you as a carer, the right and choice to have a free flu jab, topical at the moment, get your flu jabs everybody if you can. Protection against discrimination or harassment, requesting a carer's assessment, which can be very handy.
It can.
In terms of the support you get. Being consulted before your loved one is released from hospital, I think carers need to be sort of really getting much more support in terms of social security and involvement in the NHS. I think those are two things that I would kind of like to see. Yeah. And not called benefits, called social security.
Yes,
like
I
it used
hate
to be.
the word benefits.
Yeah.
It's not a benefit, is it?
No.
It's a necessity to live.
Yeah.
And there's quite a lot of judgment on how people spend it.
Yeah.
You know, oh, well, why haven't you got why haven't you got enough money to pay for care? Why haven't you got enough money to pay for a vehicle? You know, people's circumstances are very
Do you use
diverse.
professional carers in your family?
So we have, yes, we have direct payments from the council, and we have carers that help support Lewis, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And how was the direct payments experience with Cornwall Council?
I've not had a huge amount of issues. Again, it's very clear to see what Lewis needs. I think it's more difficult around people with more hidden disabilities. That it's the problem comes, you get your direct payment and that's lovely, but how do you find the people? So at Disability Cornwall now we've just got a new contract to help people to find PAs that have got direct payments, but that's a really tricky task, especially when there's complex needs. And quite often, it's another fight to get the rates of pay that carers need. You know, professional carers, they should be paid a good amount of money. When you're doing personal care, when you're hoisting, these are skills. These are not, it's not something that anybody, just because they can't get another job, should be doing. And that seems to be the sort of image that's been portrayed, that it's okay, it's a minimum wage job, but it's not.
Well, the other thing is, if there was a proper social care, sort of national social care service, that could be a route into nursing and a career in the NHS, if things were structured in the right way.
Yeah.
So it wouldn't mean that you stay on minimum wage as a carer forever. There should be a career trajectory.
And I think the Skills for Care Board are really working on that now. They are looking at, making everybody who's a carer, at least £1 more than the national living wage, access to training, being able to further yourself. Because what is to attract somebody who's a school leaver or college leaver into becoming a professional carer? It's really tough, isn't it? And we want those people. Lewis would like some young people that were, lively and go out and do things with him.
Yeah,
fantastic. And you want people of a similar age. It would be really good, but there's a real lack of those people around.
Yeah.
I mean, he's very lucky. He's got some really good carers, and they're as good as gold. With him. But there's times where you've got holidays to cover, sickness to cover, and it becomes really tough because then it's back to me.
Yeah.
And he doesn't really want me out with him, swimming or at the pub.
Because you're his mum.
Yeah, unless I'm paying.
So, yeah, because I'm just thinking as well that because you were talking about sort of almost contracting carers, whether that's something you feel is a good thing. My personal view is it's almost like procurement gone mad, in the sense that it'd be good for somebody to do that for me.
Yeah.
I don't want to be doing that myself. I don't want to be employing people, but it's a delicate balance, because you've got strangers in your house and all the implications of that.
It's really tough. It's really tough because a lot of the people that I've had that have been carers have also been my friends, and that's quite tough to have those friends in your house doing stuff for your son, or taking him out. And it's good in some way because you know that they're nice people and that they'll look after them. But equally, when it comes to like something that's not going so well and you want to change it, that's really difficult with your friends to say, could you do that a bit differently? That's quite a tough call. Whereas if you're an employer, there's a separation there, isn't there? But having somebody in your home is really...
It is, yeah. And also having the strength and the ability to be able to say, please don't do it like that, do it like this, or can you do that, please?
Yeah.
Because from the carer's point of view, it might be, that's just a piddling little thing and it doesn't matter. From the person who's being cared for point of view, it could be the difference between being comfortable for the rest of the day and not. And those things are kind of almost taken for granted, because, you know, if you've got something in your eye, or I have, we do that, we wash it out. That's not necessarily capable for somebody.
No.
And to have that minor irritation for a few minutes might not be the end of the world, but for the person who's being cared for, that can be really distressing.
It can be really tough. I think I've had to resolve to thinking, right, okay, is what they're doing, is that adequate? May not be how I do it. It just needs to be good enough that,
Sure.
you know, it doesn't have to be perfect all the time.
Yeah.
Because I did really struggle with, you know,
Yeah.
my God, you haven't got the right socks on with those jeans.
Yeah.
Just silly things that don't really matter, as long as he's happy and he's chosen what he wants to wear. That's absolutely fine.
Yeah.
So it's letting go of some of that, because essentially he's 24, but he's still my little lad.
They always are.
Yeah, and just making sure he's okay and he's being looked after. And there's some unusual things, like as a parent you have to let your children go, don't you, and do things for themselves. And so Lewis likes to go around like supermarkets on his own, because he talks about being independent, and he has a basket on his lap and off he goes, and then he comes back and he'll have like 3 bottles of beer and something in his basket, and you think, right, okay,
that's a man's basket.
Yeah, that is a man's basket, and a CD or something. And I said, right, and some deodorant generally. And I said, right, you've got loads of that at home, you need to go and put it back. Now, when the carers go out with him, quite often they'll walk around with him, and I think he can do that, but I get the worry as well. You know, what if he goes? No,
well, they're responsible in that sense.
And it's that sort of balance, really.
And does Paul need any aspect of non-family care?
No.
No.
He's pretty good, really.
Yeah.
Some reminders sometimes.
Yeah.
You know, when he's quite low, he struggles a bit with different things, but no, he's pretty good. So, of course, I cook because we want to live, but. He's not a cook, bless him.
Yeah. Do you enjoy that, or do you sometimes think, oh no, I'm going to cook a meal again?
Yeah, no, I think that quite a lot. That's a bit difficult, but luckily, you know, Ashley's a chef as well, so he's trained up, so he does do a little bit of the cooking, which is great. And some nights we just say, bugger it, we're going to have a takeaway.
Yeah, sure.
So, yeah. Life's okay.
Yeah.
It's all good.
Fantastic.
But it's, you know, it just could be a little bit easier some days, couldn't it?
Yeah.
Same for everybody.
Yeah,
but
I think so. But it's probably more about, I don't know, agencies being a bit more joined up, and people just thinking a bit more consideration, and also just finding some way to kind of mesh social security and work and support and flexibility a bit better, and a bit more common sense and trust in the system.
Yeah.
And I don't know what you think as well about whether we've got particular issues in Cornwall, because it just strikes me, you know, neurological support, Trelisk, pretty poor compared to other parts of the country.
Okay.
We've got all the stuff that everybody knows about, ambulances queuing and all of that kind of thing. So it just strikes me that we've got that added dimension of being in Cornwall, where, you know, we're kind of the poor relation when it comes to a lot of things.
Yeah, it can be. I mean, I was talking to the, when I calmed down with the wheelchair assessment, I was talking to the OTs, and they were saying that we're the only county that don't have OTs to come out to deliver the wheelchairs to set them up. Mm. So that's done by the company who supplies the chairs. Well, with the best will in the world, they're not OTs.
No, well, that might be part of the problem.
Yeah. And so I've insisted that they come out when the new parts come. But that's really tough to do that all the time. You know, that sort of, I'm having to fight all the time for different things that like Lewis or Paul might need. It would be so much
That's a
nicer.
lot of energy.
Yeah. And people say, well, you ought to do a complaint about that. And it's like, I could complain every day about something, but it's wearing and it makes you feel quite poorly.
Yeah.
You know, I don't want to be.
And with the NHS, you only get 2 bites of the cherry. Mm. And if they decide the second one you haven't got a complaint here. They shut, the wagon circle and they shut you down.
Mm-hmm. And I think I need to save my energy for better things.
Yeah, pick your fights.
Pick my fights, yeah.
Yeah. Michelle, it's been an absolute pleasure. I've really enjoyed this. Thank you for being so candid, because I know these are personal issues and we're sharing them with the audience. I hope everyone's got something out of this as well. And wherever you are and doing your caring work, thank you very much. Take care.